You ever go back and reflect on how far you've come in your career by taking a look back at your work history? I'm going to do that right now, starting with my very first real job. Hey everyone, it's the Coco Nomad here, and on this channel, I talk about financial and location independence. I share tools, tips, and techniques that help you make a living and a life. And in this video, I just wanted to reflect on my work history, and this will be the first of the two-parter, where I started to think about the summation of my career, my work experiences, and how they've influenced me, and interesting things that may have happened along the way. And then also from a financial standpoint, the progression in salary. So I will share some of that as well. And just think about how far I've come. I'm really, really grateful, and I appreciate the starting point, where I came from and where I am, even though I'm not where I want to be. I'm still on this journey. I'm embarking on this fire journey for financial independence, but I am grateful and I don't take things for granted. And I remember where I came from. So I just wanted to share this. There's some interesting things there, and it made me laugh. And I think back and I try to take lessons from every job, take some positive things out of all of these experiences that I have and use them as I move forward. So I wanted to share some of those as well, if I could. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have to go all the way back to the olden times of 1986. For my first job, my first real job. Now, before I would do odd jobs, I would cut grass. I did piecemeal work in like the local farms, where like a truck would come up and my cousin and I would just pop in the back, and then they'd take us somewhere and we'd pick for the day, and then you make money. So I never really made a lot of money in those regards. Like when I did those gigs, I remember the first day I picked cucumbers for pickles to make pickles with. I worked all day, and I think I made $2. And then the next day the truck came back and I got on the truck and I made $5. So for 2 days of work, I made $7 total. Full disclosure, on the way home, we would stop at a convenience store. I loved hot dogs and Coca-Cola. Even though I was living in the Carolinas at the time and Pepsi ruled, I'm a Coke guy. I'm from Atlanta. I spent all the money on Coke and hot dogs and Hostess cupcakes, because I love those too as a kid. So, but here in 1986, I got an opportunity. My grandfather allowed myself and my cousin to go leave North Carolina, ironically, to go pick tobacco in Connecticut and Massachusetts. And this is something that my parents did when they were younger. It's a different type of tobacco. It's cigar tobacco versus the cigarette tobacco that I think they use, and the plants are taller. So I went away, and for the first half of this summer, I actually didn't pick tobacco. They put us in a nursery. So they took all the smaller, younger kids, and they had us like moving plants around in the nursery. So we just load up these trucks with plants, and they would just move them to another side, or things that needed to go out and things that were coming in. And I did that for the first half of the summer. And then for the second half of the summer, I actually transitioned into the tobacco fields, and I got to work and pick tobacco. It's probably a little bit more than half the summer. I think we only did the nursery for like the first month. Now, salary disclosure. This is 1986, and this is agricultural work. Minimum wage is $3.25, I think, at the time, and that's what they paid me while I worked at the nursery. When I switched to the tobacco field, I just got paid for, you had a certain quota that you had to pick, and then anything over that, you would get the bonus. And so that's how that worked. So my first real job, $3.25 an hour, if we're looking at an hourly. And these, I'm trying to focus mostly on hourly, although there's one that's kind of an outlier in this era of my life. So that was 1986. I don't even think I was in high school at the time. Maybe I was in high school. I think I was in high school. So the next summer, I decide I'm kind of over, I've done enough agricultural stuff. I've been doing that stuff since I was a kid, spending summers with my grandparents in North Carolina. I'm staying in Atlanta. So this next year, I get a job at Pizza Hut, and I get a job as a busboy. And I'm really young. In fact, I was young enough that I think I had to get a work permission to work in a restaurant. I wasn't allowed to use the slicer. I wasn't allowed to do certain things at Pizza Hut. So they had me working as a busboy. Although by the end of the summer, I was able to at least help prep pizzas. I did a lot of prep work. I used to always come in early to do inventory rotations and prep work. My cousin used to tease me that I was a Dunkin' Donuts guy because I had to get up really early, so it's time to make the donuts, as that old ad used to be. And it's still one of the longest commutes I've ever had. And this one I always love because it just kind of takes you back to an old Outkast reference. I caught the 86 Latonia headed to Decatur because that was my bus. And so when I heard that song later years in college, I was like, wait a minute, that's my bus. I did this every day. Every single day I was on that 86 Latonia. That's how I got to work. And I made $3.25 an hour there. Ironically, when you work as a busboy, so they're supposed to pull tips. This is one of these early lessons. The servers didn't pull tips with me. I didn't get any tips. I just got my hourly salary and that was it. And so $3.25 an hour still, a year later, not really making any more money, but I got free pizza. I could take home like personal pan pizzas. My family got sick of personal pan pizzas after about a month or so, but I still loved them. I ate those things all the time. So then it brings me to the following year in 1988. I got another job working in restaurants, fast food, because that's, it's easy to get hired at my age and with my skill level, whatever. I started working at Arby's. In Arby's, I started out at a brand new construction Arby's on Memorial Drive. That Pizza Hut I was working was downtown in Atlanta near Lindbergh, Lenox. Anybody that knows the Pink Pony, I worked at the Pizza Hut right behind the Pink Pony. But this Arby's was on Memorial Drive, further out in Decatur, East Atlanta, outside in the suburbs. And I worked as a cashier at a brand new restaurant. I trained at an older one, so I could see the difference. Like it was old, it's like the old school Arby's with the big cowboy hat, like sign out front. Everything's greasy because this is a caked up roast beef and all this stuff for years and years. And then we get to this brand new, pristine, never been touched restaurant for work. And before we did that, we went to this pep rally. They literally had an Arby's pep rally. My family thought I joined a cult. I had come home preaching the benefits of roast beef. It's 25% less fat than hamburgers. I was all in. I drank the Kool-Aid. Like I drank the Jamocha shake, basically. And so, but it was a fun job. I really enjoyed the managers that I work with. They shared a lot. And this is when I first heard the phrase, if you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean. And so when we weren't busy, you're supposed to be wiping down the countertops, cleaning any equipment that could be cleaned, restocking, all of these kinds of things. So it was always like, don't waste those moments because we're going to get in rushes. And when we hit those rushes, we're not going to have time to do it. Now, the interesting thing about that job was, even though I was hired to be a cashier at the beginning, by the first night I was on DriveThru. And that's when I discovered my voice. I used to work with DriveThru and I would be, welcome to Arby's. This is Alonda, may I take your order? And people would respond to that. Like the girls that could drive, they were older. So, I was like a young teen. They drive their cars and come through and I'm trying to flirt and thinking I'm cool and everything like that. So it's just like, oh, they're like, oh, you have such a nice voice. You should be on the radio. And I'm like, yeah, all right, thank you. And so it was just a fun time. And I did get a bit of a bump in pay. At this point, I made $3.65 an hour. So, hey, it's over 10% raise over what I was making before. So it was good and it was fun. And it was also my first job closing at night. So that's when I learned locking that door like 5 to 10 minutes before closing, because there is nothing worse than someone coming in a minute before closing and making a big order. It's like, oh man, we started breaking stuff down because you think like for that previous half hour, nothing's going on. Nothing is happening. And anybody who's ever worked in restaurants, this, like you're starting to break things down. You're folding the chairs up. You're starting to clean the floors. And then in comes always somebody. Now, later in college, I became that guy. I was that guy at Fellini's. I would order like right at 2 a.m., 10 minutes before, but it was always to go and they'd have it ready. But it was a great experience. And so this would be my last sort of job because I didn't do a summer job the following summer. Well, I did, but it wasn't super successful. And I'm not going to get into that. But the following year, 1990, I actually got a scholarship that was a part of a program with the Defense Department. And this was like a real, like my first, what I would say, like proper, like big time job. And I was working I initially interviewed with NSA, National Security Agency. And I didn't get that, but then they referred me to the Defense Intelligence Agency. So I ended up working for the Defense Department and while I was going to school. So it was part of this program where I was studying, engineering program, and then I would come and work the summers in Washington, D.C. And I got to work at the headquarters on Bowling Air Force Base, but I also spent time at the Pentagon as well. So sometimes I'd be at the Pentagon, and it was during a Desert Storm. So this was like huge during that summer, a lot of things going on. When I first started working, we're in the middle of like one of these, we're seeing it now, but we're seeing all the time with like the Congress arguing over a budget, and they didn't have a budget. So I actually started the year not getting paid, not getting the money that I needed to pay for school. It was very, very stressful actually when it started out. So I was scrambling, trying to get loans and figuring out how I was going to pay, because that was the only way I could pay for college, or I was going to have to like get a job and try to figure out how I could work and go to school full time. And at the time, I just didn't see that. So I was very, very grateful and beneficial. And then one of the interesting things about that time there is I actually got to meet Colin Powell. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. I'm going up an elevator. Escalator. He's coming down. I was like, hey, good morning. He says, good morning. And so it was kind of interesting. He is actually the first of two Secretary of States I would meet. I met Condoleezza Rice later in a different locale, not outside of DC, but I just always thought that was really interesting. And there were always people like that, like, members of Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of Defense, walking up and down the hallways, you'd see people. Or they would be there during the day or at the Pentagon. So it was very interesting. And at that time, it wasn't an hourly job, but my salary was $11,000 per year plus benefits. And if you work in government or you're in the military, you do understand the concept of a duty station and some of these benefits that you have. And so it was really good for me as a student to offset that cost of tuition and be able to pay it for the time that I did have that scholarship or was a part of that program. I didn't stay in the program. And maybe one day I'll talk about some of these issues of like looking back and understanding why I wasn't able to maintain and stay. And it's very interesting. At the time, I didn't see that, but later I could understand. But it was good. The benefits were great. I spent the summers in DC, and they actually paid me a per diem, which I had never experienced before either. And it was like $30 per day, which was insane. It's like giving this like 18-year-old kid $30 a day for food. Like, what am I going to spend it on? But it was a lot of fun. I had a couple of other friends that I still have to this day that we talk about and reflect on that crazy summer. We rented this broken down, beat up rent-a-wreck car because they wouldn't rent cars to people under 25 a lot of times. So that was the best we could do. So which takes me to the last job I want to talk about in this hourly era. I did work some temporary jobs in between and some a little bit later, but none of those lasted a long time. I only really wanted to focus on the ones that lasted, a bit, either an entire summer or I worked there for like a couple of years. And the last one is JCPenney Credit. This was a job that I had, and I actually worked with one of my college roommates. He found the advertisement in the newspaper for this job that started at $8.55 an hour, which was paying better than what I was working. I was working at a restaurant again. I was working at this place called Billy Bob's. Anybody's old school Georgia Tech on West Campus, Billy Bob's. I used to work there serving up chicken fingers and stuff. So you probably saw me working the cashiers. I was the cashier. But I moved on to take this job at JCPenney Credit, and it was my first customer service job. So I was learning a lot about interacting with customers. A lot of people were trying to shop. They were having issues with their credit card wasn't working or their limit wasn't high enough. And so I learned a lot about credit at that time because my job entailed running credit reports to determine whether or not people qualified for an increase. And sometimes these are big purchases. People were trying to buy furniture. And back then, JCPenney's, they weren't bankrupt. They were able to, they had a huge catalog. Me and Sears were like the big catalog companies. They sold all kinds of stuff. They sold home furnishings, and these things would cost thousands of dollars. So people would start, maybe they were shopping and they had an initial account with a $400, $500 credit line. Now they're trying to buy $4,000 worth of furniture. So we would do that processing, and I'd learned how to listen when people were upset and try to help resolve issues. I wasn't always able to do that. I couldn't always give the person what they wanted. Some people were still upset when it was over, but usually we were able to do some things to sort of help that customer, either making a payment in store and then giving them a temporary increase in credit, or like going ahead and doing a quick evaluation and bumping up their credit. So it was a great experience for me later working in tech support, in that getting a phone call and someone's up here because they are very, very upset, and getting them to calm down so we can communicate and we can talk through the problem and try to come to a resolution. So those are the first 5 jobs in my career in what I call the hourly era, even though DIA was an exception because it was an annual salary, that was paying me, that really influenced my work history. And then the next batch in part 2, I'll talk about the salary jobs. And now, because that's when I start getting to my actual career in computing and really starting to work in tech, working as a software dev and some other roles that I've progressed from and into. So if you are interested, stick around. It's coming. As always, click the like button, click subscribe and the notification bell if you want to be notified when new videos come out. Hope you found this interesting. In the comments, share a little bit about your first jobs, the early parts of your career. What did you learn? What did you take away? Did you ever meet anybody interesting? A lot of times I know people like my sister, she got to meet a lot of celebrities. She worked in retail. And so she'd always tell me these stories about celebs that would come through. So it's always interesting to hear. So have an amazing time. As always, have a great day. I will talk to you next time. Cheers.